Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of FDIalogue, your go to podcast for fresh insights on foreign direct investments and its impact on industries in Indonesia and all around the world. This podcast is brought to you by Global Indonesia Professional Association, or GIPA. We are a global network of Indonesia professionals and executives around the G20 and ASEAN. We're representing 8 key industries worldwide. At GIPA, we focus on advancing Indonesia's economic diplomacy and human capital development. I'm Crystal, an economic diplomacy associate at GIPA and an Indonesia professional working in the tech industry. Joining with me is my friend Shalka. How are you doing today?
Hi Crystal, I'm great. Hi everyone, welcome back.
Awesome. Thanks, Shalka. Today we're diving into the theme Be Ready or Not, aligning domestic reform with Indonesia's global ambition. This episode is inspired by a fascinating new initiative from the World Bank called the Be Ready Report, where it focuses on 3 key areas: reform advocacy through international benchmarking, policy guidance via data-backed recommendation, and research and analysis that digs into what really drives the private sector development. We have the honor today of being joined by Pak Wempi Saputra, as he currently serves as the Executive Director for Southeast Asia at the World Bank Group. Before this, he was Indonesia's Assistant Minister for Macroeconomy and International Finance at the Ministry of Finance. And he has held several key leadership roles since joining the ministry in 1995, playing a major part in its transformation and reform agenda. He also serves as Indonesia's G20 Finance Deputy. He also serves as ex-officio governor for IFAD and director at AIIB, amongst others. Not to forget, he holds a PhD in economics from Nagoya University with earlier degrees from University of Indonesia. Now, Pak Wempi, we're truly honored to have you with us today. How are you doing today, Pak?
Very good. Thank you, Krista. Thank you, Shalka, for having me. A great pleasure to meet all GIPA audience and also the podcast audience for today's conversation.
Thank you for being here today, Pak Wempi. This podcast will unpack the shift of Ease of Doing Business Index to the Be Ready and why it matters for Indonesia. Then we'll examine how the Be Ready Index links to broader governance and regulatory challenges. And then we'll look at the key investors' obstacle like market competition, financial services, and insolvency. Then finally, we'll wrap up how Indonesia can act on these insights to boost more sustainable investment. Shalko, what do you think? I want to pass it to you.
All right, thank you, Crystal. So let's just dive right into our questions for today. As Crystal previously mentioned, the World Bank has launched the new Business Ready Index, or Be Ready, replacing the long-standing Ease of Doing Business Index. So, Pak Wempi, could you please start by explaining to us what actually is the Business Ready Index and what is the reason behind this change from EODB to Business Ready, and why is it relevant for Indonesia?
Thank you, Shalka. Thank you, Crystal. I think this question is very timely and relevant. Actually, if we see the shift from the Doing Business report, as you know, already dismantled by the World Bank a couple of years ago, and then changed to Be Ready framework, this is a fundamental change, especially in the World Bank Group. So at least there are 2 reasons for this. Actually, first, on the focus on data integrity and transparency. As you know, in many media, I think already reported that doing business face criticism over data accuracy as well as some manipulation concern regarding some countries and data regarding the performance of the doing business. So focusing on data integrity and transparency, the Be Ready initiative actually would like to emphasize again, not only about data integrity, how data is being collected. This is publicly available and replicable. So this kind of the focus of data integrity and transparency become like the platform, the true north of this Be Ready compared to the previous doing business reports. So in this case, what would be the benefit for Indonesia? Of course, Indonesia to be seen as the brightest spot among the brightest spot to attract the foreign investment and how to improve their business climate based on this Be Ready assessment. The second variable I see that about integration into strategic products. As you know, the World Bank has been doing many diagnostic reports, and this Be Ready is integrated into various World Bank group diagnostic and strategic products. In the World Bank, at least there are three, we call it flagship reports. The first is World Development Reports, the second Women, Business and Law Reports, and then Global Economic Prospects. So this is very much integrated. Be Ready benefits all this diagnostic and try to draw some policy advice, recommendation based on the evidence, data integration, statistical inferences, so that give some recommendation about the policy to the government. So this is particularly very relevant to Indonesia because it might create what you call it, an environment of policy dialogue and engagement, not only for the perspective of the public sector, but also the private sector. So this it Be Ready very much emphasis to hear from the private sector, not only from the public one. So to balance, yeah, to balance the data performances. And the third one, very much focusing on what would be the relevance for Indonesia in this case. So many gap, as you know from the Be Ready report, right? So we got around 60 something. So the rule of thumb on this Be Ready, try to get at least 70, the value, so that you are considered because not only the fourth quintile, but have to be much more better than Vietnam, even maybe near to Singapore, New Zealand, and those very, very good performance in this Be Ready. So for Indonesia, the focus on identifying and addressing critical obstacles will be in the next question, I think, on the private sector development, such as private sector development, about the bankruptcy law, much more focus on the access to finance, and a more broad strategy to attract foreign direct investment, and how to also improve the policy to support economic recovery. So this kind of the focus, the fundamental shift of the philosophy at the World Bank from doing business to Be Ready framework and how it could benefit to Indonesia.
I see. Very interesting, Pa. And it's a very important shift because it talks about so many structural aspects of the report itself, Pa, and the reliability of the results as well. So you mentioned that Be Ready measures a bunch of different things, and one of the statistics that we have is that Indonesia is placed in the fourth quintile globally for multiple aspects, and one of which is the regulatory framework and efficiency. And among others, maybe there are some results that you mentioned previously as well. So for our audience of global investors and policymakers, what do you think is the most important message they should understand from this headline finding about Indonesia's investment climate?
Yeah, this is should be very brief, I think. I see this Indonesia's regulatory environment needs strengthening efforts in order to enhance investment attractiveness. So there is a room for improvement, by the way. So Be Ready provides this kind of perhaps critical factors to be strengthened. And this ranking indicates that Indonesia's regulatory framework may present challenges in terms perhaps on the efficiency and effectiveness. Because I'm the bureaucrat, I know exactly sometimes the regulation inside the government, sometimes too slow, and also might be too bureaucratic, so many processes, and potentially impacting the ease of doing business and the attractiveness of the country for FDI. So when the investor would like to come to the country like Indonesia and see the process of this regulatory environment, too many processes, complicated, I think might create, uneasiness of the investment to those potential investors. So in this case, we have to treat investors they are aware Indonesia is a significant opportunities for investing. And Indonesia now very much serious, very much focused in navigating its regulatory landscape. Of course, there are some need some additional efforts, due diligence, and strategic planning. But in this case, also we would like to mention to policymakers that this finding could be underlined that uh, the need for reforms to strengthen the regulations. Again, streamlining the regulations, improving transparency, and enhancing the overall business environment. So I think this is could become a good start to improve this the regulatory environment. Then, in order to enhance the investment attractiveness.
So it's like a wake-up call, ya, Pak,
It
for
is.
Indonesia.
That's wake up call. Yeah. If
Yes.
we can come, maybe already too late, Schalke. Perhaps I think already.
Should have
Yeah.
woke up since many years
Yeah.
ago.
Yes.
Um,
Right.
so the World Bank also has several forecasts, right, about Indonesia's economy, especially maybe for our investments or general economic outlook. What do you think? What can you share about World Bank's forecast about Indonesia's economy, and how does the results from Be Ready actually link to those forecasts, Pak?
Yeah. In terms of economic outlook, global economic prospect of the World Bank, I'll be focusing maybe on the four variables because this is quite long discussion on the GEP. Yeah? First, growth outlook. In terms of growth outlook, Indonesia is remain strong amid external shocks. As you know, the growth in 24 was 5%, led by domestic demand. In 25 is around 4.7%. 26, I think 2026, 4.8%. So only Vietnam and India in Asia beyond Indonesia in this case. So I think this kind of very good performance reflecting not only about the robust macroeconomic policy, but also maybe synchronizing the policy implementation, economic policy implementation in the country. But in terms of the some of the maybe a bit declining from 5% to 4.7 and 4.8% in 2025-26, of course, we are very much aware on direct impact on tariffs, lower import demand by trading partners, so might influence each other. The softer commodity prices, as you know now, become influencing the economic growth. Financial condition quite tightened, and also high uncertainty affecting investment. So the connect to Be Ready, by the way. Despite these challenges, medium-term growth in Indonesia, hopefully, and being projected by the World Bank to recover around 5% under current policies. Second, on inflation, well-contained inflation, the midpoint of 2.5 plus minus 1% target, and the range of the sharp drop due to you remember one-off electricity subsidies in early 2025 around February, but core inflation remains within the target range. So good monetary policy. Policy agenda. Key elements of the policy agenda already defined by the government: investing in human capital, expansion of industrial policies, and efforts to boost self-sufficiency on food and energy. I think this is on track, and hopefully government could maintain this very good policy. Water security, food security, energy security. I think this is quite okay to support the business climate and facilitating trade. And the last on the risks. So near-term risk, the outlook tilted on the downside. It's quite difficult to predict the trade policy uncertainty, as you know, and there is a potentially tighter than expected financial conditions. So these two factors, trade policy uncertainty as well as tighter than expected financial condition, should become a good reminder for the government to maintain or maybe to manage the risk in the near term. At the same time, in domestic agenda, there are some large policy shifts without sufficient guardrail. As you know, in the 130 days of President Prabowo Gibran, at least around 45 policy already being implemented, and some halfway, some already finished. So we have to see the remarkable progress of this, but also some challenges along the way. So this is not easy, but maintaining the prudent macroeconomic framework and ensuring clear policy communication and guidance. So these two factors could mitigate the risk in the near term at least. So hopefully the Indonesia's economic outlook remains positive and strong domestic demand and driving growth. What would be the structural issues identified in the Be Ready potential impact Indonesia's ability, as you asked before, to meet or exceed this forecast? This is a very good questions. I might see this on a couple lens perhaps. First, on the regulatory framework and efficiency. We spoke before about this at the beginning. So Be Ready report places Indonesia in the fourth quintile globally for regulatory framework and efficiency, to indicate challenges in regulatory framework. So inefficient regulation can hinder business operations, then increase compliance costs, then deter foreign investment, which are these three factors crucial for economic growth. So improving regulatory efficiency is essential to attract investment and to enhance competitiveness. The second, in the perspective of the investment attractiveness itself. So as you know, the structural issues not only about high risk, they call it in rating agency call it high country risk rating, and sometimes also the problem of lack of coordinated national planning between ministries and agencies also could affect Indonesian attractiveness investors. So in the World Bank, we underline at least there are two challenges of the investor when it comes to the motivation to come to Indonesia. First, consistency of the policy, whether this policy could be sustained in the long run, because one, they already invested, they have to make certain policy decision in this case, and they very much depends on the policy consistency of the government. The second, too many actors. They have mandates. I have mandates from the law. I have mandates from presidential regulation. I have mandates from the ministry decree. So many mandates. But when it comes to talking end to end, not so many agency can do. So this kind of I think investment attractiveness very much depend on the policy consistency and end-to-end process. Too many actors, too many captains in the field, but cannot explain end-to-end process. This is what you call it, less attractive to the investors. Infrastructure development, this is quite encouraging for Indonesia. And as you know, state-owned enterprises, the government has been doing so hard in improving our infrastructure, I think for the last decades. So these structural issues on infrastructure development, if it is lack, so might impact economic productivity and growth. So the government should be very much focusing on this to develop infrastructure, but also to develop an efficient infrastructure development, spending better. And the last point, I see that public acceptance and domestic financing. There is an ongoing discussion that the public acceptance of the private infrastructure and enhancing domestic financing capacity are necessary to support large-scale projects. The government budget does not enough in this case, so we need private capital mobilization, but there are some structural barriers. So this already identified in the Be Ready reports, and what will be the recommendation, not only about the scope and also the speed of economic development initiative to be mobilized, as well as to address the current regulatory and also investment climate problems.
Okay, but interesting. We caught several keywords that you mentioned, like efficiency, regulation, and how important it is to streamline the processes, yeah, Pak, in order to enhance our FDI attractiveness, on top of several other aspects like public acceptance, financing, infrastructure, and so on. If we go beyond Be Ready, and the World Bank, on top of the economic prospect, also creates the Worldwide Governance Indicator, or WGI. And similar to what you mentioned about regulation efficiency in Be Ready, in this indicator, We also were measured in terms of regulatory quality, which places Indonesia in the 60th percentile rank. What do you think about this number for Indonesia in terms of efficiency is one thing. Maybe do you want to discuss more on the quality side of it, Pak?
Yeah, actually, the WGI is a data point based on perception, and it is reflected in the Be Ready findings through several aspects. First, on regulatory quality, again, on regulatory quality, right? So WGI assesses the government's ability to formulate and implement sound policy and regulations that promote private sector development. So we are talking about the PCM. In the World Bank, we call it private capital mobilization. At the same time, Be Ready findings highlight Indonesia's position in the fourth quintile globally for regulatory framework and efficiency. So this is not only about the quality, but also efficiency. So much more broader perspective. Indicate about the challenges in regulatory processes that can impact business operations and how to attract investment to the country. So very much related in this case, formulate and implement sound policy of regulation, and then Be Ready focusing on efficiency, how to attract the investment. The second on government effectiveness. So Schalke, you underlined the right point, I think. So not only about the quality and efficiency, but also the effectiveness. This government effectiveness reflected in WGI indicators on the quality of public services and policy formulations. In the Be Ready findings suggests that inefficiency in government processes can hinder economic growth and development, aligning with WGI assessment of government effectiveness. So this is like a two sides of the coin. So WGI talking about the so-called government effectiveness. At the same time, Be Ready findings inefficiency in government can hinder processes. Inefficiency of the government processes can hinder economic growth and development. So this kind of the two sides of the coins. The third one on control of corruption. This is quite, I think, quite critical for the country. So while WGI measures perception of corruption, again perception based, which can affect economic performance and governance quality, government's credibility in this case. But Be Ready also Be Ready findings may reflect challenges in addressing corruption, impacting Indonesia's ability to improve what we call, again, governance indicator and economic outlook. So, regulatory quality, governance effectiveness and efficiency, and then control of corruption. This is, I think, overall what WGI data points provide a framework to understand the governance challenges, then being identified in BRD findings, both of them emphasizing the need for regulatory improvements, enhance government effectiveness, and anti-corruption measures in order to support, again, Indonesia's economic growth and development, investment, boosting investment.
So it's an all-around call for action, ya, Pak. Not only one aspect of the policy, but an entirety of the reform itself, so we can enhance further. Now, moving further to maybe a related aspect, but a little different, where you mentioned previously one of the other flagship reports by the World Bank is the Women, Business and Law report, which recently in 2024 we also received a score, maybe a couple of different scores depending on the scoring method, yeah, but one of the scores that we got was the score of 60, indicating some legal barriers to Indonesian women's economic participation. And from your point of view, how does this link to the business environment that we have reflected in the Be Ready report? Is this something that we should also be alarmed of?
Actually, the legal gender gaps identified in the Women, Business and the Law is quite a long report and also very sophisticated to understand. Indonesia got 60. In my view, these indicate quite significant barriers to women's economic participations. So what is the link between these, the gaps create friction in business environment and then measured in the BRD report? I think there are a couple lens could be seen. First, on business entry. So legal barriers can restrict women's ability not only to start and operate businesses, but also to develop, get the bank ability business. So Be Ready report measures the ease of business entry, and gender gaps can lead to fewer women entrepreneurs, reducing overall business dynamism and innovation. This reflected in the Be Ready findings. So in Be Ready, women, it is described that women face challenges such as not only about limited access to credit and collateral, but also maybe how to start the business, understanding the regulations. And sometimes, in many cases, women very much focusing on micro businesses, which is not bankable. So they need some capacity building to address these business entry challenges. Second, on financial services. So gender gaps in legal rights, yeah, not only could limit women's access to financial services, banks and non-banks, but also impacting the ability to grow and sustain businesses. So that is why I think some data mentioned around 64 million small medium enterprises in Indonesia, and about the small and micro, around 80 to 90% led by women entrepreneurs. But the problem is how to grow and sustain businesses. And in this case, Be Ready report assesses the availability and efficiency of financial services, bank support, legal barriers, how to support the women entrepreneurs to assess these services so that they can grow their businesses and also much more participate in the economic development. And the third one on economic performance. So there is correlation between gender equality in legal rights and economic growth is already well documented. So many studies in this case. But legal barriers to women participation not only can lead to suboptimum economic outcomes. I already mentioned about they prevent women from fully contributing to economy to grow and sustain business. And Be Ready trying to focus on regulatory and operational efficiency and highlighting how gender gaps can hinder economic performance. So in many cases, women businesses, women entrepreneurs contribute quite significantly to economic growth. So providing a good business entry capacity, financial services, bank ability, and economic performance strategy, this is could become a very good relations. And what we understand from the women business and the law, this is reflected and to be ready like the continuations. Women business law identifying the gaps and really try to identify the factors. What would be the policy recommendation to the government?
Very interesting, Wempi. Thank you so much. Maybe before we dive deeper into the core challenges that investors face, as we found on Be Ready report, maybe if you want to share other types of diagnostics that the World Bank has that may be linking to Be Ready, for example, the CPIA assessment or maybe other indicators, please feel free to share as well, Pak.
Yeah, actually, the CPIA, the Country Policy and Institutional Assessment, is very prominent report and focusing on IDA, International Development Association countries. So in the World Bank, we have around 140 clients. We have 189 members, but 140 clients. Out of the 140 clients, there are 75 IDA countries, low-income countries and middle-income countries, which is very much vulnerable to climate and other shocks. So CPIA focus on IDA. There are also IBRD countries like Indonesia as well, but not to be disclosed. But in terms of the relations between CPIA and Be Ready, actually granular findings in Be Ready, such as tax processes or trade logistics. And then what would be the realm of the competitiveness and productivity? This is very much related, the CPIA and the Be Ready. In terms of the tax processes, the Be Ready findings about how the country are facing efficiency in tax processes, especially for Indonesia, and what could be the impact on business operation and economic growth. At CPIA, it evaluates the effectiveness of countries' policy and institutions, focusing on institutions, in supporting sustainable growth and poverty reductions. So CPIA talking about the micro side, while Be Ready try to identify much more micro side in this case. So very much connected. The second on trade logistics. Be Ready findings on trade logistics not only reveal challenges in port operations, logistics services, trading procedures, and sometimes custom procedures. So even the custom clearance and other thing, time really study being identified as the Be Ready. These issues, of course, can increase not only about the cost of doing business, transaction costs in the airport, seaports, reducing competitiveness, then these factors actually part of the CPIA assessment of the overall country economic policies and institution. So CPIA taking benefits also from the Be Ready identifications about the challenges in port operation, logistical services, and trading procedures. So there are many numbers, but Be Ready much more complicated than CPIA. And the third one on competitiveness and productivity, while CPIA evaluates policy that support competitiveness and productivity, of course, very much impacted to the findings by Be Ready, but Be Ready itself identifying what kind of the restrictive regulation and efficient logistics can hinder the private sector growth as well as economic performance. So this is the relation between CPIA and the Be Ready. Other indicators, quite interesting actually, Schalke in this case, human capital index. As you know, Indonesia's human capital index, I think a couple years ago, 0.54 is below the average for countries in East Asia Pacific, is around 0.59. So this human capital index indicates the challenges in health and education that affect productivity. In many conversations, I think, with the private sector companies in Indonesia, actually, the potential of business in Indonesia is large, but human capital availability is not there. When Microsoft came to Malaysia, Vietnam, and Indonesia, what is the difference? When they come to Vietnam and Malaysia, they provide software development. In Indonesia, data center, because we don't have sufficient software engineers. So human capital quality is, I might say, quite low compared to other peers in Southeast Asia. Of course, to Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam, even for Vietnam, right? Maybe we are quite comparable to the Philippines. The second logistic performance index is quite long time in doing business, already described in the logic, we call it LPI. So this is very critical for trade and business operations. So LPI, Logistic Performance Index, they measure not only efficiency of the customs, infrastructure, logistics services, and this kind of factors very much influencing conducive business environment. So how to reduce this cost? How to increase the competitiveness? So this is impacting Indonesia's Be Ready performance. So this is Logistic Performance Index very much related to the Be Ready performance. And one more thing about universal health coverage, UHC. So the World Bank has been supporting Indonesia for this UHC, not only how to improve health outcomes. As you know, Indonesia now has been involving and implementing the largest ever health transformation program, $4.2 billion supported by 4 MDBs. The World Bank, ASEAN Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank, and ASEAN Infrastructure Investment Bank. So the largest ever health projects in the World Bank now is Indonesia, $4.2 billion. Hopefully for the next 5 to 10 years might create the fruitful result and outcomes so that we can increase not only about universal health coverage. As you know, already we have JKN, Jaminan Kesehatan Nasional, coverage already 90% of the population as of May 2023. Hopefully now very near to already complete to 100%. But still there are challenges remains in the health outcomes, including maternal mortality, non-communicable diseases. So it is quite challenging for the country, I think, become the focus of the government to be tackled.
Wow, turns out there are so many indicators which have close links with Be Ready, which shows that Be Ready actually is such a holistic diagnostic tool. We're not only looking at it from one lens, but it relates with so many other layers of our country, including even healthcare, human capital, and also from the private sector side, and so on and so forth. So yeah, thank you so much, Pa, for the very crucial macro level context. And now we want to drill down into some of the specific core challenges for investors that Be Ready highlights in the report. So Crystal will lead the session. So over to you, Crystal.
Thank you, Shalka. By Wempi, I want to jump into the core challenges. The Be Ready report flags market competition as key area for improvement. Can you share any specific statistics or data points from the Be Ready analysis that illustrate the challenges in this area, perhaps regarding the lack of guidance on digital platforms or unclear merger controls?
Mhm. Yeah, this is a very good question actually. In terms of the market competitions, I think at least there are two factors how to describe this market competition as a key area for improvement. First, on digital platforms. So Indonesia's digital economy is underdeveloped, and that should be much more focus of the government to develop this potential business, especially on the connectivity improvements over the years. I think already improved, but still facing challenges. So, for instance, only 35 adults in Indonesia has received or maybe used the digital payments in 2017. Now, hopefully in 2025, becomes 67%. So this data indicates a low adoptions or maybe a bit insufficient action, needs some improvement, not only about literacy of the online payment system, but also enabling the digital economy development. So many drivers in digital economy might create potential economic growth to the country. And for example, in the Philippines, now digital divide already tackled by the government and try to improve the services sector, create new potential for economic growth in the country. The second on merger controls. So the report on the Be Ready suggests that Indonesia lacks clear guidance on merger controls, which can lead to uncertainties in market competition. It is quite complex because regarding the law, I do not understand exactly the merger controls in this case, to be frank, Crystal and Schalke. But reports indicate that this is very crucial to maintain a fair competition, to maintain good practices, to prevent monopolistic, and also how to stifle innovations in the Indonesia's, especially on this market competition. So this digital platform and also merger controls, the data points illustrate that the needs for Indonesia to enhance, again, regulatory framework and digital infrastructure in order to foster more competitive market environment that can support the innovations in the country.
Yeah, it's definitely crucial to enable digital economy development and maintain fair competition practice in preventing monopoly in Indonesia's market competition. And similarly, the business insolvency is highlighted as a risk due to outdated laws. For investors, risk is about numbers. Now, what data in the Be Ready report that really quantifies this risk? For instance, does it measure the average time or cost to resolve insolvency cases in Indonesia compared to the regional peers?
Yeah, this is difficult question actually, Krista. But let me give you maybe three focus for and resolution time. So the business association have reported that insolvency resolution process in Indonesia is very slow and cumbersome. So resolution time, when it is very slow and cumbersome, might create inefficiency and of course prolong uncertainty for businesses. So this slow resolution time is a critical factor for investors because they cannot wait. So they might compare to other peers in Southeast Asia countries, perhaps to another big countries like Brazil, India, maybe Mexico. So Indonesia already upper middle income countries in this case. So they will not compare Indonesia to Laos and maybe to Vietnam, but maybe to Brazil, to India, to Mexico, to Chile. So this I think become very much concerning and resolution time. Second, on cost of insolvency. Indeed, there are some report and BRD also indicate that the cost associated with insolvency proceeding is very high. So it's very relative, by the way. But I think in this case, BRD try to identify maybe too many processes involving in this process the insolvency. So the businesses could be deterred, from pursuing necessary restructuring. So they don't want to do because they are afraid when dealing with this kind of insolvency, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money without. So some colleagues perhaps give some anecdotes in this case. In terms of insolvency, they become much more religious because they have to pray after doing this kind of processing. They don't know what will be the end game. So this I think could become also the factors how we can identify this, how we can reduce this the likelihood of the successful what you call it insolvency, and try to also reduce the risk for the investors. And comparison with regional peers, this is quite alarming. So of course, there are some statistics, but I don't want to highlight actually, Crystal, because it's very much relative. The bottom line of this resolution time and cost of insolvency is about certainty. So market or maybe potential investors can value themselves what will be the appropriate and what you call it um, eligible uh, resolution time as well as cost of insolvency, because they understand there are different regulations, different policy and practices. But when it comes to the comparison with regional peers, Indonesia insolvency framework is less efficient compared to other countries in the regions. So this is unfortunate. Of course, it might impact also competitiveness and attractiveness to the investors. So Indonesia should improve this, how to should reduce costs and how to mitigate risk so that investor and potential investors quite convinced to come to the country. They know actually there are some transaction costs. They know about the processes, but they need some certainty. How to manage the policy consistency, as I mentioned before, and then end-to-end process, so they can predict and then they can make some investment decision.
But beyond the market competition and insolvency, the Be Ready findings also indicate some challenges in other crucial areas for investors, such as financial services and international trade. Could you highlight maybe one or two other significant measurable hurdles from the report that you believe are critical for the potential investor to understand?
Yeah, I think there are, you mentioned about two. I would highlight first on financial services. I try to research, doing small research on the financial services. First on banking fraud. In 2016, uh, there is a case of banking fraud amounting to over 10% of GDP in Indonesia. So these very significant institutional vulnerabilities exemplified with these banking fraud cases. Although financial stability has improved, the risk remain a concern for investors because they might create, impacting the overall economic environment and investor confidence. The second focus on the financial services is about access to financial services itself. This especially how to increase finance for small medium enterprises. how to strengthen the access to financial services, the policy, while initiative like maybe you remember about retail electronic payment system, REPS, it already facilitated the transactions. It already facilitated the challenge to tackle the challenge in the financial inclusion and could protect also consumer in this case. This very good initiative, improving the access to financial services. The second on international trade. So many criticism not only to Indonesia, by the way, but also to other countries, especially advanced countries, about trade protectionism. So the report highlights substantial risk due to heightened pressure toward trade protectionism. And the World Bank has identified, I think in 2024, 2,500 trade measures already implemented by many countries in the world, not only Indonesia, but also many countries, especially the advanced countries. So this trade protectionism might create uncertainty, might create pressure toward trade and also self-sufficiency policy in the country, then might create also the supply chain to the region and maybe to international trade itself. So how what you call it, the measure could make much more what you call it, reducing the impact of investment policy liberalization on manufacturing FDI. So trade protectionism should be revisited, but it's not an easy conversation. So involving many political economy conversation and sometimes economic policy being overshadowed by political driven policy in this case. So these two factors actually, Crystal, in my view, international trade and financial services is very much critical for potential investors to understand.
But Wempi, I want to walk through the path forward and investors' takeaways here. So to synthesize for our audience, if you were to point one or two most significant systemic barriers to growth and investment that the Be Ready data collectively highlights, what would they be?
Okay, actually very much related to the previous questions. So I want to be much more focused on the financial sector, on the financial sector vulnerabilities. So I mentioned before about the banking fraud in 2016, and I think this is quite remarkable for the country, become not a good example for the country in terms of the vulnerabilities. So this international fraud of the bank performance not only related what is the overall bank performance in the country, but also suggesting what kind and how far the operational risk, including the fraud, significant enough to the bank performance. So as you remember, perhaps on these cases involving social engineering scams, phishing scams, and I think some individuals are tricked to reveal, some sensitive informations, the password, deceptive emails, phone calls, and other things, and even targeting children. So PPATK, our FATF reported 24,000 children at the time aged around 10 until 18 become victims of this financial scam. So this is quite alarming to the country. And this transaction value exceeding 127 billion rupiah. So this about the financial sector vulnerabilities, I think could become focus to the government to be tackled, especially financial sector policy. The second, again, on trade protectionism. In this case, the Be Ready reports identify the heightened pressure toward the trade protectionism and self-sufficiency as a significant barrier. So this related to the non-trade barriers. But this is again political economic conversation. These measures not only could make importing to export more difficult, but also particularly reducing the impact of investment policy liberalization. Then finally impacting the manufacturing FDI. So these barriers actually highlighting how these two factors could affect negatively Indonesia's attractiveness as an investment destination.
I'm trying to quantify the opportunity here. Looking forward, what is the scale of the economic implication if Indonesia, let's say, were to meaningfully address these hurdles from the maybe from the World Bank's perspective? How could removing these barriers translate into tangible impact on FDI attractiveness and long-term growth?
So, addressing the systemic barriers of financial sector vulnerabilities and trade protectionism in Indonesia might positively impact the economic policy implication, but also enhancing FDI attractiveness. So, in terms of financial sector reform, I would suggest that government should improve investor confidence, first addressing the non-performing loans, and I think this is quite what you call it alarming for the financial sector. Improving the financial inclusions. These two factors, I think, could become a good motivation to boost investor confidence. The second, to increase access to capital. So strengthening regulatory frameworks and promoting financial literacy, especially for the women entrepreneurs, maybe young entrepreneurs, could improve access to the capital for businesses. And at the same time, let them to grow and compete effectively in the business. So this kind of environment might create investment opportunities as well as increasing the competition. Then eventually could become a strategy of economic expansion. The second, on the trade liberalization, how to enhance competitiveness. Of course, I think in the last conversation on the tariff, reducing tariff and non-tariff barriers can enhance competitiveness in global market. Indeed, but it is not an easy story to be told. So Indonesia should make more granular analytics, not only what would be the influence to attract the FDI, but also what is the perception of the investors in the country, whether it's in the short term or maybe in the long term, whether they see that reducing tariff and non-tariff barriers in Indonesia could improve the competitive environment in the, or the business climate. So this should be granularly and very detailed discussion on the tariff and non-tariff barriers reductions. And how to boost economic growth. This macro side, as I mentioned before, the trade liberalization can lead to increased export and integration, global value chain. But not only about the trade liberalization, but also we are talking about the local content, the self-sufficient industry in the domestic policy for self-sufficient industry, as well as how to develop our own manufacturing strategy. So boosting economic growth by using the trade element, this is quite sophisticated policy, and indeed in the World Bank, we are studying this: how to remove the barriers in trade, how to create conducive environment for investment, how to unlock Indonesia's full economic potential. These three questions actually among the great efforts so far of the World Bank to give Indonesia technical assistance, also policy advice, financial support, and emphasizing what is the need to the country to achieve sustainable growth and development at the macro perspective. But this is not easy. It's not an easy like a policy paper, Crystal, to be frankly. So very much sometimes the uniqueness of the policy, how to align the World Bank policy recommendation and policy advice into domestic and political agenda. This is not an easy conversation. But at the bottom line, if Indonesia would like to enhance quantifying the opportunity, as you mentioned before, so we have to address the challenges on financial sector reform by improving investor confidence and increase access to capital, but also to boost trade liberalizations, how to enhance competitiveness, as well as how to make these trade liberalizations that could lead or to boost the economic growth in the long term.
It's definitely crucial to as you say, to improve those investor confidence, improving financial inclusion, access to capital, and boost trade liberalization. It supports in creating this conducive environment to attract more FDI. We want to know on the guidance for investors and diaspora here, Pak Wempi. How should our audience here, both global investors and Indonesian diaspora, think about this Be Ready report? Is it warning, or is it a roadmap for due diligence, or a call to action? What is your key takeaway for them on how to engage with Indonesia's development journey?
Yeah. As a headline, I would suggest that Be Ready report should be viewed as a multifaceted document. Do not be too sensitive and take it positively. So there are three factors in addressing this Be Ready report so that we can get the benefit, not creating the chaos of the so-called unproductive discourse, right? First, warning. So many indicators highlighted in the Be Ready has provided significant systemic barriers such as financial sector vulnerabilities, trade protectionism, which pose risk to investment and growth. So investors should be aware of these challenges and they assess risk, reward, balance of investing in Indonesia. And they know better than us how to assess this. But I think the warning from the Be Ready reports could become, let's say, the area of improvement to the country. So not to give a negative sign of this warning, but also like a gentle reminder, pulse check. The second about the roadmap for due diligence. So indeed, for investors, report of the ready provides a detailed analysis of the areas for improvement, the area of that need attention, right? So it serves as a guidance to conduct more thorough due diligence, helping investors identify potential risks. This is the job of the government and also maybe the partner in the private sector, and how to boost the opportunities in Indonesian market. So roadmap for due diligence, I think this could be developed, and how to improve this so that investor confidence is could be increased, and call to action. So reports is very much beneficial to the country if there is a call to actions, not only academic exercises, policy discussion, other thing, so many focus group discussion, but there is no actions. So we need call to action in this case. How this report could become a call to action for stakeholders. So Indonesia's diaspora, those who engage in Indonesia development journey, the governments, private sectors, the state-owned enterprises. So this report already emphasized the need for reforms and strategic planning. And then we can use this report to overcome barriers. We can use this report to foster more conducive environment for investment and growth. So my key takes away from this Be Ready report, actually, both for global investors and Indonesian diaspora, I think should view the Be Ready report as an opportunity to contribute, to actively participate in Indonesia's economic development. We like the country, we see the potential, the country is very large. Then we have to understand the challenges we are facing and what kind of the potential solution outlined in the report. We took it as a recommendation. We tried to what would be the best fit solutions to these challenges, and what we can contribute in shaping more, stable, more maybe robust economic landscape, economic policy. So hopefully we try to engage, and also hopefully I think Indonesia's diaspora could be also engaged with Indonesia's development journey, involves advocating for necessary reforms, so giving very critical and positive critics to the government, and also provide solutions, so that this advocating for necessary reforms, investing in sector with growth potentials, improving regulatory environment, eventually could support initiative that enhance financial stability, trade openness, and investment attractiveness to the country. So this is, I think, take it positively, do not be sensitive, and try to contribute optimally as a stakeholders to support Indonesia's investment and economic development.
Wow, thank you, Pak Wempi. It's definitely a thing that we should see this as an area of improvement or a tool check, helping us to identify risk and challenges, a tool to reform and roll out those strategic planning for us, all of the stakeholders to contribute. What do you think, Shelko?
Yes, I totally agreed. Wempi, thank you so much. This has been an incredibly insightful discussion. So if I could sum up a little for our audience. So Wempi today has shown us that this Be Ready Index actually is a single diagnostic, but it's incredibly multifaceted, and it's also deeply connected to other critical indicators of our economy. And as we synthesize in the discussion, there are two major systemic barriers in terms of financial sector vulnerabilities as well as trade protectionism, on top of many other challenges that we should tackle together as well. And the Be Ready report isn't just a red flag or a challenge to stay away from, but rather a detailed roadmap. And it also highlights the risk, but it also pinpoints where meaningful reform can unlock immense potential for Indonesia. It's definitely a call for strategic due diligence, as Pak Wempi mentioned before, and a call to engage more people to join our Indonesia's development strategy and roadmap, because the rewards for getting it right is truly significant in the long run.
Thank you, Shalka. That's an amazing conclusion. And that wraps up our second episode of FDIalogue, aligning domestic form with Indonesia's global ambition. A huge thank you to Pak Wempi Saputra for sharing his insights on Be Ready framework and what it means for Indonesia's economic future. Your perspective helped us to better understand the intersection between global investment, standards, and local reform efforts. At GIPA here, we believe conversations like this are key to building a stronger bridges between Indonesian professionals at home and abroad and the global economy. So if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow and subscribe, share it with your network, and let us know your thoughts. Stay tuned for our next conversation, where we will continue unpacking the forces in shaping Indonesia's global role. Until then, on behalf of GIPA team, thank you for listening, and see you on the next episode of FDIalogue.